Something's been on my mind lately I'd like to discuss. Have you ever noticed that everyone who impersonates Arnold Schwarzenegger makes this sound?
Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he comes out there. La, la, la.
Do you ever wonder if he ever says, "I do not say," like Drac in Hotel Transylvania?
I don't say blah blah blah.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with Tales of the Dead or Resident Evil. It's just something that's been on my mind at night, as I stare up at the ceiling and slip slowly into madness. Hello, I'm Xander Webber, and welcome to Mortem, Inside Tales of the Dead. Over the course of this video, I will be discussing a lot of the Easter eggs I placed in this season of the show, and give a sneak peek at some of my plans for the future. Not all, of course. I can't spoil everything. All jokes aside, before we get too deep in this, I'd like to get very honest with you. I'm done hiding or being ashamed of my hindrances that made me stop writing for 13 long years. I won't share everything, but I will share the big issues I've dealt with. And after that, I won't be discussing this again. When I was a teenager, I was actually published for writing. I would have had scholarships to college for my grades, and my life would have turned out very differently. This isn't for sympathy. This isn't for anything of the sort. I'm just tired of feeling lesser because of it, and I want to.
Own that shit. Own it!
When I was 15, I was on my way to St. Louis Children's Hospital for testing on a chronic cough that turned out to be whooping cough, and all I needed was a specific antibiotic to kick it. Frustratingly, instead of visiting the hospital, I was admitted after a car accident that changed everything. That accident left me with a traumatic brain injury, chronic migraines, memory loss, trigeminal neuralgia from damage to the nerves in my head, and studies I've seen recently indicate that the accident may have led to my fibromyalgia diagnosis as well. This also means my brain and my mouth sometimes fight each other, and for the life of me I can't say a word or two to often hilarious outcomes. During the final days of editing and recording, the word I struggled to say was raccoon. And in a show set in Raccoon City, it was really funny to me. In any case, after the accident, I was forced to go on medical leave from school, never able to finish high school, and as a result, I felt extremely lost. My ability to write was gone. It seemed like a distant memory from another life. The words that flowed through me, the universes I could peer into, all faded away. Everything changed after that, even my personality, which isn't uncommon for TBIs. I felt like a different person who had awoken to someone else's world. Everything felt foreign and strange. To slightly paraphrase Marilyn Manson, whose music has gotten me through a lot in life, I just felt like I was condemned to wear someone else's hell. I felt like some deep, dark abyss had opened inside of me. And I felt emotions because of all I had lost. I didn't have words for. All because someone was late for work and plowed into us. Naturally, I stopped writing until 2018. By that time, with help from a therapist, the memory issues were becoming bearable. Memories were coming back at an accelerated rate, and my brain injury healed enough for me to try my hand at writing again. It'll never be normal, but with great effort, I have reached a point where I'm more functional with the memory issues than ever, but I'll never regain everything. I still live in constant pain with my pain diseases, but at least my trigeminal neuralgia seems to be in remission. With the announcement of Resident Evil 2, I began my first countdown to evil. I've said before, horror is what's kept me alive all these years. But like Rick Grimes said on The Walking Dead, surviving just to survive isn't living. That countdown was what made me feel like I was living for the first time since the car accident. My writing was terrible because of what all I missed in school and what I had forgotten. But so many of you loved my knowledge of Resident Evil. You said I showed you things you never knew with your favorite franchise, and hoped I would try writing fan fiction. Strangely, the one thing I could always hold on to despite my brain injury and memory issues was pop culture. So much so my family has called me the Rain Man of horror because my brain is like a computer when it comes to it. I've also been compared to Randy in Scream, things I've never been more proud of because it meant I was still good at something. This extended to Resident Evil as well, especially the lore, which is so deep and extensive. It always felt like home to me. I never get tired of reading about Ari's creatures and characters. This is why I never understood how the Paul W.S. Anderson movie dropped the ball so hard. The story is right there, ready to be plucked and expanded upon. But if I talk about those movies, I'll never stop, so I'll digress now before I get too lengthy. Anyway, over the next year after my countdown to evil, I acquired 3 jobs in the field of reporting on Resident Evil. One I never even really started, because JJ from the Residents of Evil hired me to be the record keeper. Over that time, those worlds that seemed lost came flooding back. My writing is a little weird. I don't as much create the worlds as try to translate what I see in my head. I see them, I hear them, I feel them, and I can see their history and futures all at once, their hopes, their dreams. Hell, during some of my writing with my original novel, I had conversations with the characters and wrote what was said. My mother actually thought I was fighting with someone, but it was just me acting out the parts while I wrote. Spelling is something that's always came easy for me, and that never went away, but the rest did. I have since relearned a lot thanks to help from my mother, who has helped me by reteaching me sentence structure. I now have 2 extended universes in my head, and over the next year I will finally share my original novel to the world. A story that has been with me long before the car accident, but was all but lost until the last few years. All my stories will become radio stories in time, so anyone who wants to try their hand at acting can audition. Moving forward, I won't be doing as much acting as I did this season, except in my original novel entitled Merrick, Into the Holy War. I plan to play Merrick, the protagonist. I will definitely need to cast someone who can be around for ongoing projects, because the antagonist part of that series, the demon, will be in many stories of the Merrick Chronicles, so work and acting will be abundant if anyone is interested. That being said, I do have a lung condition, and some days are harder than others, but when it was really bad, it inflamed and did damage to my vocal cords. As a result, I can't do all the voices and accents I did as a kid, and my characters will sound similar, but no one has said even one disparaging word about that this season. Thank you, truly. This does mean my voice can easily go with extended use, and I often do 100 retakes or more for 1 page of work, just to make it sound clear. Another reason why this first season took so long to complete. My voice was not used to being used so much. It is getting strengthened with time, but this is still an issue I have to deal with. To be honest, I was never happier to get to Carpenter's death, because it meant I didn't have to strain my vocal cords anymore to betray him. That motherfucker was rough on my throat, man.
Giggity giggity, giggity goo.
As I have stated in the past, I left the Residents of Evil to find time for both my health and to be there for my mother, who also has health issues. I never would have had time to finish this if I stayed with everything else. As Sylvester Stallone said on Instagram, you keep kicking that can down the road and you'll never complete it. Life gets in the way, but if you don't knuckle down and find time, that idea may be lost or be changed by time. I don't want that to happen anymore. I had my writing gone from me for so long, I never want to be away from it again. I just couldn't fit that in as well, so that's what led me to stepping down as the record keeper. Now, Tales of the Dead. Let's start with the Easter eggs in Chapter 7, the Raccoon Police Department. As promised, I will discuss all 28. The first one that may have been missed is Marvin on the loudspeaker here.
Attention, all remaining Raccoon citizens. This is Officer Marvin Branagh. We advise you to take shelter at the police station. Again, this is Officer Marvin Branagh, advising you to take shelter at the police station.
This is a direct reference to the Remake 2 trailer with this here.
Attention all citizens. You are advised to take shelter at the Raccoon City Police Station.
Number 2. The next one is more easily noticed. I wanted to not only mention the Manson incident, but the Arklay Mountains because the protagonists, Lieutenant Stephen Conrad, Lieutenant Alejandro Rodriguez, and Private Williamson aren't from Raccoon City, Missouri.
The cannibal disease goes all the way back to July.
Carpenter mentioned that last night, actually.
Oh, right. Forgot with everything that's happened.
Yes, lots of disappearances. Lots of deaths with hikers and campers in the forest. We are led to believe it was a cannibal cult at first, then a cannibal cult and animal attacks. The Stars said they found evidence Umbrella was to blame for it all during an incident in Raccoon Forest involving a mansion owned by Umbrella. The mansion was destroyed, and the mansion incident was ruled an accident. Umbrella stated it was destroyed due to the mishandling of chemicals in the basement. However, Stars claimed differently and never stopped, even after their suspension.
So this was an easy way to set things up in my first season by having the police and Veronica Price explain what's transpired, as well as my subtle changes to the story and my connections to S.T. Perry's newspaper articles. This wasn't in the story initially, but after contacting S.T. Perry, who was beyond kind, she let me adapt her unofficial writings into the story. All those newspapers have hints to things that's happened in the show. Even the articles I wrote, like Mysteries of the Mummy's Tomb, mentioning the Egyptian artifacts of the Clock Tower Museum. To attack at water treatment plant leaves Raccoon police on alert. The attack at the water treatment plant was mentioned in the finale, as to who did it. But I don't want to reveal the name. But if you're a diehard Resident Evil fan, and you caught some of my lines about who did it in the finale, you probably already know who it is. But that's all I will say on that. Number 3. Not only is the cannibal murders mentioned, but I wanted to explain why those early murders probably didn't return from the dead. The strain at that time was the E strain, and was mixed with Ebola. I don't want to get too in detail on the virus and get something wrong. I have articles I wrote on this during my time as the record keeper that I will make into videos at some point, but the different strains of the T-virus are tricky. Without refreshing myself on my research on it prior to writing this, I might make a mistake, and I don't want to do that. I will say the strain in the game that spread during the outbreak was from the Dead Factory being flooded by experiments by Birkin. William Birkin knew he was about to be killed, so as a last-ditch effort to stick it to Umbrella, he overwhelmed that facility that was designed to destroy test subjects once they were done with their research. This caused the T-virus to mutate and leak into the city's water supply. I never realized how much of a plot hole this is until I played the Resident Evil 3 remake. With all the wrong choices of that game, I will say the removal of the Dead Factory was a brilliant choice. Think about it. Umbrella must maintain secrecy at all costs to keep their research hidden, so transporting experiments constantly from the Arklay lab and Birkin's nest to be destroyed is illogical. Can you imagine how many trucks that would be regularly? The odds of something getting lost is high. Sporadic shipments of specimens like the hunters in my scene with the trucker is far more likely. Even that was a risk and didn't turn out well.
Are you okay? Hello? I'm gonna get you out.
But it wasn't something they did all the time, so making them dispose of test subjects on site is much more logical. Number 4. The next one is a give me. The black body bags in the entrance to the RPD in Remake 2. I always assumed they were there because they hadn't got to burying them yet, so they stuck them out there until they found time, preventing it from stinking up the place. Number 5. The boards being placed up to secure the RPD from the dead. This is something I will revisit in future seasons. Rewatching Night of the Living Dead 1990 this week, which is my favorite zombie movie, I got visions of them placing the boards up at the RPD, and honestly, I can't wait to write those scenes. Number 6. It took some thinking, but I wanted to add the herbs to my story. How to do that logically without it seeming hokey was the fun part. So I added the local natives discovering the healing properties of the red and green herb, and later mentioning the anti-poison properties with the blue herb. On that note, I once had a buddy of mine point out, at Resi Vegas Plays, who played Alan Hopkins. Alan fell to his back as the dog jumped up and bit into his face. That there was a pink herb found in the files of Resident Evil 0. We've been dying to know what this was meant to do for a while now. I've still never found the answer to that. I kinda wonder if it wouldn't be what the yellow herbs did in future games. But that's just a theory. Number 7. The honorable mention of what sounds extremely nauseating. Herb ice cream from Remake 2. Number 8. The mention of the graves out back. This will be mentioned again in the future, and I have a very special scene involving these graves next season RE fans won't want to miss. Number 9. Coke versus cola machines.
What? No Coke?
Rodriguez took the soda from Elliot with a mischievous, playful smile.
Funny you should say that. We actually had a Coke machine, but they pulled it and replaced it with this shitty knockoff brand. I never found out exactly why.
Something about Irons not wanting to pay the extra fee for Coke to keep it here in the police station.
Ah, of course. It always comes back to cheapskate Irons, wherever the hell he is. Hope he stays there.
This is a reference to the original release of Resident Evil 2, 1998, having a Coke machine in the hall, leading to the library. While finding pictures for this, I just learned in something called the prototype version of RE2, that I'm assuming must be Resident Evil 1.5, they apparently had a Pepsi machine instead. It was changed from Coke to Cola in all future versions because Capcom got in trouble for using an established brand without permission. Apparently there is a Choca Cola machine in the conference room I never noticed with the shitty graphics of the PS1. I think this might be a reference to their blunder with Coca-Cola. To me, pulling the brand name soda to replace it with a cheaper version totally sounded like something cheapskate Irons would do to save money, to pocket for himself later. Number 10. Irons' mishandling of the cannibal disease. The politics of the police was always something I wanted to touch on. Not everyone at the RPD, or most in fact, including the citizens of Raccoon City, were happy with how Irons handled the cannibal disease investigations. Some people believed the stars, most did not. But him never coming up with a definitive answer as to why so many was killed in July began creating ripples through the city. That's part of what led to the riots, but I'll touch on that more next season. 11. I already mentioned above, it's the mansion incident. Number 12. I couldn't have them go to the RPD and not mention Captain Albert Wesker. During the 2 weeks I spent looking at tiny details within the RPD in Remake 2, I noticed not only does the desks not have personal effects, which seems like a strange choice to me, but the doors for Captain Albert Wesker, nor does the lieutenant in the downstairs office, have names on their door. While on that note, Lieutenant Eliana Campbell is based after my niece, Eliana. Elliot Connolly is based after my nephew. Both characters will return in later seasons, and a shout out to Ryan Downer for doing such an amazing job bringing this special character to life for me. Unless something changes, and he doesn't have time, he will be returning as Elliot Connolly in the future. Number 13. Brad Chicken Shit Vickers. The choice to call him Chicken Shit is a loving homage to S.D. Perry and her legendary Resident Evil novels from almost 20 years ago now. If you haven't read them, they still sell them on Amazon for a very, very cheap price. I wish Capcom would hire her to finish her story, but that's never happened and doesn't seem likely now. That doesn't mean these books shouldn't be read. I feel every Resident Evil fan out there should at least read these once. Number 14. The desk with the gun magazines Elliot draws the map on for the soldiers is Barry's desk. Number 15. Next to Barry's desk is a shelf full of first place trophies on shooting. these are all Chris Redfield's, whose expert marksmanship goes all the way back to his time in the military. Number 16. Kendo is naturally a reference all on his own, but the street closure, and even though it's not referenced this season, the location of Kendo's being behind the RPD are both references to Remake 2. Number 17. The school bus with the survivors mentioned by Officer David Ford, who was played by JJ from The Residents of Evil.
We've got buses, and they're trying to pick up as many survivors as they can, but 2 of the damn things broke down. One is all the way on the other side of Huntington Acres in North Raccoon. It's a lower income section of the city, so lots of people up there. How little Veronica made it here is beyond me. She's a brave one.
This again is a reference to the burning school bus in Remake 2. I have ideas for this as well for next season. 18 and 19. Naturally, I had to mention Claire Redfield and Leon Kennedy during Chapter 7. This Easter egg, coupled with number 19, with the mention of the Stars' personal armory, is paving the way for my eventual remakes of the main series. But right now my focus is on the untold stories of citizens trying to survive, like Outbreak. I actually used a song in that episode by the amazing Survival Spheres, who specializes in Resident Evil and Silent Hill themed music that was actually called The Untold Stories, and is in the scene with The Office in the West Wing. Number 20 is also paving the way for my remakes with the mention of the Stars' personal armory and Chris's coded letter sent to Brad while he was in Europe, trying to shut down Umbrella's main lab. 21 and 22. Jill Valentine in her apartment.
You don't understand! This can't wait! He's coming! I have to find Jill! You really don't know where she is?
Brad, calm down. What the fuck are you talking about? Who's coming? And Jill might be in her apartment if she's still with us. I haven't had time to check in on her. That's when she'd actually stop to rest. If she isn't there, last thing I knew she was rescuing as many civilians as she could, taking them to a warehouse in New Prague or a few here, if she was close enough to the area. It's been 2 days since we last seen her.
This is another slight homage to S.D. Perry, by mentioning her bringing survivors to a warehouse in New Prague. That district isn't mentioned in the books, just Remake 3, but we all know it's something Jill would do. Every time I play the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, I always imagine that the game picks up a few pages after S.D. Perry's book began, which was entitled Resident Evil Nemesis. This also sets up her tale in my remakes, along with what happened at the end of the Season 1 finale. As for using New Prague as the location of her apartment and the warehouse, I originally had a different map from the original game when this first began, but with the release of Remake 3, I chose to use the map of that game instead with the new districts. It's one of the few things I like about that remake, and despite being very similar to the original map from 1999 in the center of the map, where the RPD and the clock tower is located, the rest was greatly expanded upon. This new map from Remake 3 made Raccoon City almost 2 or 3 times larger than its original size. There isn't much I will be using from Remake 3, just a little bit here and there. That's apparent with Jill actually going to the clock tower in my story.
Everyone has a story, even if it's the tales of the dead. They need to be told.
But this is one of my few additions from that game I feel they got right, because it gives me a much larger sandbox for my stories to be written in. Also, with Raccoon City being a thriving metropolis, it makes sense it would be way bigger than what was shown in the original game with the PS1's limitations. Unless something changes with scheduling, Jill will continue to be played by Amber Collins for all future Resident Evil projects. Number 23. The blue spade on the door. It's subtle, but I thought it would be an injustice to the story not to mention the special locks at least once. Number 24. Dario Rosso and his family, who was brilliantly played by Alvin Coffey and Sleepy Bananas.
Shh. Sweetie. We'll be okay. We'll be okay.
You really think we're gonna be okay? Oh, you fucking stupid Helen! We can't be certain of anything! This is hell!
I've always felt Dario was a reference to Night of the Living Dead with the asshole and the tux in the basement. His wife's name is Helen in those movies. Me naming his wife Helen is another homage to that movie. Outside of the Manhua comics from China, we haven't seen his wife and daughter. Only saw mention of them in his journal in the RE3 video game from 1999, and from what he said about how he just lost his daughter out there. But the Manhuas aren't in English, and the translated versions that were online I haven't been able to find again. There is still evidence of their existence in a video by ScorePN. Here on YouTube I will link below, but since these Manhua comics are so rare here in the United States, this entire story is a bit of a blank slate. I'm sure you've seen my season finale at this time, or you wouldn't be watching this video, so you know Dario and Helen will be returning next season. Number 25. The reference to Welcome Leon and the party decorations. Eagle-eyed gamers will have noticed that the original 1998 video game misspelled the word welcome by adding an extra L. In Remake 2, Capcom parodied this by adding a space for the extra L. And just like in my story, the letter can be found on Elliot Edwards' desk in the new game.
Oh, you must be the new guy. Leon. Sorry, but it looks like your party has been cancelled.
Number 26. The nameplates on each of the desks. All these are characters who will eventually be used in future stories to some fashion or another. I'm still confused Remake 2 references characters from Outbreak and the hidden location under the female statue in the lobby, but we still don't have any mention of an Outbreak remake being in the pipeline. Number 27. JoJo. For you youngsters out there, JoJo and the Lockers has been around since the original 1998 game. What many US gamers won't know is JoJo was a reference to a very long-running manga series entitled JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Number 28. We Do It statue. As you all know, We Do It is from the announcement of Remake 2, with the man showing his shirt that features the 3 words. This was a very bad translation, but nevertheless, a hilarious way to announce a video game. Designers hysterically added this phrase to the bust in the waiting room. It's a little hard to see without hacking the game to move the camera, but We Do It is actually the RPD's motto according to this bust. This addition to the RPD has honestly always made me think of the t-shirt that said, "Cops do it by the book," in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Now let's discuss my finale. Naturally, there are many Easter eggs, especially in the finale, and in Carpenter's map in Chapter 8, Raccoon City Justice. But I of course can't share everything all at once. I have to leave some surprises for later. I will say, as you know, the misfortunate soldier is the dead UBCS member at the clock tower from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, 1999. I doubt few people were as heartbroken as I was the clock tower was removed from Remake 3, because that meant this soldier and the woman that reminded him of his sister was removed. This show was the result of seeing these two lying together, and many conversations that went late into the night with my sister all those years ago. These two characters were literally the progenitor for my Tales of the Dead. All those untold stories that were never told in the games, kind of like Outbreak. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the Outbreak games because of the controls, and not being able to read the files easily, this show is kind of my remake of those games. I love the lore of Outbreak. I love the idea, even if I didn't care too much for the finished product. Tales of the Dead was originally called Diary of the Dead, long before the Romero movie of the same title. It was going to feature journal entries from survivors around Raccoon City. I wrote some of that as a teenager before the car accident, and always wanted to write the untold story of the UBCS soldier at the clock tower. Before anyone asks, I no longer have the notebook that was wrote in, only an early draft of my Merrick that is vastly different than what I am writing now. I had the misfortunate soldier's name in my head before anything else. Conrad. It's actually one of the things I recovered when my memories came back with therapy. Every character in my story that isn't in the game is named after a celebrity's last name. Carpenter is naturally John Carpenter. Williamson is Kevin Williamson, writer of Scream, my favorite horror film of all time. Rodriguez is after Robert Rodriguez. Sarah Weaver is after Sigourney Weaver. Jessica Curtis is Jamie Lee Curtis. Veronica Guerrera is both from someone I went to school with named Veronica, and Denai Guerrera, who was Michonne. Veronica Price is Vincent Price, who I have always adored since I was young. Vincent's movies are truly one of a kind, especially House on Haunted Hill. I won't share everyone's name because that would probably bore you, but if anyone is interested, just ask, and I'll post it in comments below. The reason Conrad's name isn't a celebrity's is because, as stated, I had that name before I planned to homage movie stars. So his first name, Stephen, is after Stephen King, which I came up with shortly before I began to write this first season. Now as to how this will link with my remakes of the main games, finale hints at that. Jill at the trial with Conrad's journal and file, fighting Umbrella over their involvement in the outbreaks. Conrad got what he wanted, and will aid in the downfall of Umbrella. From this one character, an entire universe begins. I also envision Jill fighting a hunter with a gunshot in her left arm from the trucker's shotgun. The hunter is just a little connection, but the journal and file is a much larger connection, along with other Easter eggs I won't discuss at this time, but it's all hinted at throughout the show. Again, especially in Carpenter's map in 8. I'm about to create a timeline with my little notes, so I won't fuck this up. Let's face it, you start making sequels or an extended universe, you need like 20 chalkboards, red strings, or a timeline. Considering I can't afford 20 chalkboards, nor do I have the room for that or the red string, we're gonna go with a timeline. Just like Elliot and Eliana, something else in the story has a connection to what few family I have left. Rodriguez's death, where he remembers the day Bella said she loves him for the first time, is based on something with my uncle, many years ago. I think while he was still dating my aunt, before they got married, my uncle dressed up as Zorro and brought her lunch at work, just to be romantic. He just didn't drop the food. He did have a sword though. The dedication at the end of the episode to my mother is true. If it wasn't for her help, as I try to overcome my brain injury to write this, I wouldn't be the writer I am now. This story wouldn't exist either. By that I mean my love for horror. My love for Resident Evil stems from memories with her. The first time I played Resident Evil was Resident Evil 2 on September 28th, 1998. Brain injury and all, I'll never forget that date, because ironically it's the same date that game takes place, which terrified us both even more. My mother made me promise if I had nightmares I'd tell her and we'd stop playing. I had nightmares every night for weeks, but I couldn't stop playing, so I lied and said I didn't. It was like an addiction, and my love for horror was born. I'll also never forget her opening the door in Chief Irons' office and seeing the stuffed tiger. We didn't know it was stuffed at the time, so she made a complete 360 and left the room screaming, "No, no, not messing with a tiger, not happening, nope, nope." She literally noped right out of there, and was extremely annoyed to learn she had to go back after spending hours searching the RPD for another way to progress. We went back and found it was stuffed, and we couldn't stop laughing. One of the top 5 memories of my life right there, hands down. If you look closely, there are Easter eggs in the bulletin board during Matthew Mickelson's file. The number for Eddie, the zombie security guard. The first part of the phone number, 573, is actually a prefix for Southern Missouri. And there's no way anyone except my family would know this. But the last 4 numbers, 3667, is part of one of the phone numbers we had while we still lived in Missouri. There's also a hint at the Jazz Festival flyer from Resident Evil 2 on this bulletin board, along with another flyer for a radio station. I won't talk too much about that now, but it is a hint at something that's coming in the future. Tales of the Dead was my first completed story, and I want to thank everyone who has been a part of this journey, for all the kind words, and pushing me to be a better writer, or just wanting me to write again, period. If it wasn't for all the kind words everyone told me on Twitter, I never would have done this. I wasn't kidding when I said I spent forever watching videos for editing. That has inevitably thrown my schedule for new projects way off. The next one, while I write more original stories, will be George A. Romero's unfilmed Resident Evil movie script. I've casted almost everyone, I just need to finish my tweaks to the script by adding the narration needed to turn it into a radio story and send out everyone's lines with my notes. Then we can enter production. The goal moving forward is to have one actor per speaking role. There are some small characters here and there throughout Romero's story that I haven't casted yet, and will require more actors than I have this season. So again, if you'd like to audition, email me. I will put the link to my email in the description below. I also have a script saved of Wes Craven's unreleased version of A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. It's supposed to be so dark, New Line said hell no. As you can see by my finale, I like dark things. So that's assuredly a project I want here at the Xander Zone Productions. I have also learned how to make Freddy's voice with editing thanks to a video by Robert Englund. In any case, the George A. Romero RE project should come next year, and while I work on these scripts, I will be writing more original content, including more Tales of the Dead. The Misfortunate Soldier You Knew. This whole story was based after his journal and the woman that resembled his sister in the game. That being said, from here on, all stories will be largely original and out of my head. I was afraid to change too much this season early on, because it was meant to be a companion piece to the games. That changed over time with rewrites, like putting Raccoon City in Missouri. I grew up in the Boot Hill, might as well be the South, and cuts into Arkansas despite being considered the Midwest. I've seen people get wolves as pets there, and heard stories of some getting alligators as well. So the mutated alligator in the sewers of Raccoon City makes perfect sense. Not to mention the Ozark Mountains has always reminded me greatly of the Arklay Mountains, so this is why I put Raccoon City in Missouri. As for next season, it will be vastly different, because they aren't soldiers. They're teenagers, so it will be a very different kind of survival horror. As a result, that story will be very much a teen scream, and begins on September 20th, 1998. The protagonist will be Veronica Guerrera, and will show her story of what transpired, with some surprise guests and creatures along the way. The amazing Rian, who played her this season along with Veronica Price, will be reprising her role. The one person I know won't be reprising his role is JJ as Officer David Ford. So if anyone is interested in playing that character, feel free to audition. With JJ's busy schedule with his spectacular Resident Evil content at the Row, it was a bit of a strain this year to do this part, so a bigger one would have just been too much for him. I have been in talks for him to make a cameo in the future, maybe as the proprietor of JJ's bar, but that's just discussions at this time. We will discuss it again closer to production when I have those scenes written. While on the name change of Jay's bar to JJ's bar, I did that as a personal thank you to JJ for bringing me on as the record keeper at the Row. Before I tell you about something very special, I wanted to showcase 2 clips I received from my actors. The first is from Taylor Myers, who played Brad Vickers, and the second is from R. Simon Rivas, who played Marvin and the trucker with the Hunters.
He's coming! I have to find Jill!
I didn't add the door sound in this. That's literally part of his clip, and I have no idea where it came from, but he was beyond committed to playing Brad. Then R. Simon Rivas almost hurt himself playing the trucker, but goes right back into character.
Ah! Wait, stop. Chair. Ah! Cut.
I do have something to share with you involving this story. Unless something has changed since I talked to Amazon last year, I can make my Resident Evil story into an official paperback novel. They will also put it on Kindle and release an audiobook for it as well, even though I kind of have the audiobook part taken care of. If nothing has changed since this is fan fiction, I will post a video here letting you know it has been released, and you can take home your copy to put next to your SD Perry Resident Evil books, which again, definitely go buy her books. It's a must for RE fans. Then tweet her on Twitter and tell her Xander talked you into getting her books. She's a total sweetheart who I wish got more recognition for her writings years ago. I'll leave a link to her books on Amazon and her Twitter for you to give her a follow below. I've talked enough though. Thank you again for watching the show and post-mortem Inside Tales of the Dead. Post-mortem is something I will continue next season. It just may be more frequent than just once, and a lot shorter. I hope you enjoyed the insight into my vision of evil, and I look forward to seeing you all for future projects. I will be taking a break with making videos for a while because I desperately need to write again. In the meantime, there will be videos on video games and horror films from my partner at Resi Vegas Plays. There will also be live streams of horror video games from my other partner, Vector Fontaine, aka Sleepy Bananas, who played Williamson.
This is my first mission with the UPCS branch of Umbrella. I never told my family about my discharge. They think I'm still with the Army.
So please give them a warm welcome when their content shows up. I'll be linking their Twitters below along with mine as well, so be sure to drop a follow. Also, if anyone is in need of voice actors for a project, drop me a message and I'll reach out to my actors to see if they're interested. Several of them, including Vector Fontaine, wants to be professional actors. I will be looking for more content providers as well, and will still do periodic horror news and eventual live stream of my own, when I have a PC capable of doing that without having an aneurysm. But as I said, my main focus will always be my writing. Have no fear, fellow horror hounds. I will return soon enough, and with more radio stories. So stay tuned, and as always, stay green, survivors.